Okay, so what did I have you do? Is I gave you individual bags of candy randomly for my giant bag of candy bag, and I had you rate on a scale of 1 to 10 how you like each of your things. 28 people total. Then you traded. Then we rated again, and now we're going to analyze the results. So first of all, I need to know, like, what did you think of the activity? What sort of came out at you during the activity? Was it hard to trade certain items? Was it easy? Yeah, go ahead.
I think for me, it wasn't difficult to trade like my item because I had Skittles, and like a lot of people tend to like, even if they don't love you, they can tolerate it.
Okay.
So
it's like a nice, like, everyone kind of lowest common denominator. Good to know.
So, yeah, I think for me, it was more so looking for people that had what I wanted. I don't really like things like that.
I see, yeah. You don't like them, but you found that they were kind of a useful, almost a currency. Everyone will take them. Interesting. What was not popular? What was something that people did not like? Yeah? The what? The Laffy Taffy people didn't like? Oh, that's awkward because I have more of that. So some other class is going to be sad too. Whatever. All right, good to know. What else was not popular?
Milky Way.
Milky Ways were popular, really? People don't like chocolate?
Because it has peanuts.
Milky Way doesn't have peanuts. It does? I think Snickers is having peanuts.
Probably just an allergen.
Oh, like an allergy. I never think about it. Maybe maybe it's one of those made in the same facility kind of things. Well, how are the Snickers? The Snickers are sometimes really popular. They were okay? What was most popular then? What was something that people loved?
I think the larger packs of things like the gummy bears and the lifesavers and the Skittles were
larger. Okay. So less about the chocolate, right? More about the little individual. Good to know. Okay. Now, some of you are rated really high. And I always have this issue that some people who I'm randomly giving out to everybody, I might happen to give somebody something that they will just really love, and then they won't be interested in trading. I corrected for that by giving you a lot of the same thing. How does that correct? How does giving you a lot of the same thing correct for that possibility? I'll just get, because I gave some people like that they really love, right? We had some pretty high values before I even traded. So how does giving you a lot of the same thing fix that? I haven't heard from. Yeah, go ahead. Why? There was a concept we discussed that explains it.
Is it the marginal thing where if you first have a lot of things, you're willing to sell it for less, but then once your stock kind of diminishes, you want to trade it for more?
You said that key word, right? Diminishes? What concept is this? Diminishing marginal utility, right? So, who, by the way, was like, I gave like a 9, who gave a 9 or a 10 before they even started? What did I give you? Snickers. You like Snickers, right? But you still traded, I see, right? Because, like, I think I gave 6 Snickers in that. Yeah, I gave 6 originally. Yeah. So, case in point, right? Why did you trade them away even though you rated them so highly? Yeah, you want to try something different, right? Diminishing marginal utility. So kind of a bit of review. Any other comments on this? Was it hard? Was it easy? You can go ahead and start eating, by the way, if you want. Just clean up your stuff. I don't want a trash can right there when we're done. I don't want to get any messages from facilities about how I'm teaching my students to be slobs. But there's another layer to this, because note, I can calculate the total amount of utility. We had 167 total utility before trade. What happened after trade? Went up. We can even calculate the growth rate. So we know how to calculate the growth rate, how much happier people have as a result of this trade? The growth rate of the happiness. Do we know how to calculate that? Yeah?
The difference divided by the average.
New divided by new minus old. divided by old, which is mathematically the same thing as but if you're ever looking for one step to do in your calculator rather than 2 steps, you divide it by old and then you can mentally subtract off 1. I don't do too much with growth rates here, but when we do GDP, for example, we want to calculate a growth rate, it's exactly the same equation. So we can calculate how much happier, how much did satisfaction grow by just pumping this into the equation, right? 205 divided by 167 minus 1. And you got, we as a class, you as a class, got over 22% happier by just letting you trade. Right? Appreciate how amazing that is. Because we didn't add anything new. I randomly gave you a bunch of stuff, and then I said, just figure it out. I didn't micromanage anyone. I didn't say, you should trade with each other, you should try to find each other. I only said, you can open up your bag, and you might want to stand up. You move around a lot. I saw a lot of activity in the middle of the room. Did you move around the room a lot? No, maybe. Well, you all kind of gathered at the same place. You really need to. Right? A market kind of emerged, right? A marketplace emerged so that you can interact with each other, you can trade with each other. And without without adding anything new into the market, society as a whole became happier. Total utility increase. I've done this activity many, many, many times. You can even see the old ones. 142 to 213. 142 to 206, that was a quick one. 161 to whatever it was before. Oh, this one, 181 to 200, and so forth, right? Over and over again. Started at 115, ended at 169. Started at 182, ended at 239, etc., etc. Why is this? Right? Before, after, over and over again. They had a 33% growth. They had a 34% growth. You guys are actually pretty fat. But why is it that over and over and over again, I always get a growth rate? I always get total satisfaction increasing. What happened? How is that so reliable? Yeah.
Because allowing people to have the choice of what they actually want to eat or what they prefer would allow them to have more satisfaction with their game.
I like that, but build on that. Think about what has to happen in a trade. What has to happen in a trade? Yeah, Emily.
Mutual agreement.
Mutual agreement. Tell me more.
I mean, trading without like forcing anyone to give you something for something you want. So both people are happier with now the new options.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Did you ever try to trade with somebody and they said no? Yeah, all the time, right? It happens all the time in this game. Did everyone try to trade with you and you said no thanks? All the time. The only way a trade occurs is if both people agree on it. And both people only agree on it if both people are better off. Hence, the fundamental theorem of exchange. Voluntary trade with complete information is always mutually beneficial. Always, 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 always. Now, sometimes people will be a little bit better off. Like, who gained a lot from this exchange? Who was much better off? Yeah. What did you start with? And what did you end with, Cameron?
3 gummy bears and 2 Skittles and Milky Way and Snickers.
So what I'm saying, what number did you start with?
Oh, 4.
Started with 4, and then what did you end at? 10. That's huge. Who did you? What was someone you traded with?
Who?
Yeah, like name somebody you traded with.
I don't know her name.
In the grave. West Virginia, yeah. How much did you increase? Josie. How much did you increase?
Well, I have the same amount of stuff for, but my satisfaction.
Yeah, your numbers. What was your? What did you start?
I went from 6 to 8.
6 to 8. Smaller, right? Smaller. Now, granted, you traded with multiple people, and you traded with multiple people. but it still illustrates this idea that both parties are better off, but that doesn't mean they are equally better off. Somebody can be a little bit happier, someone could be a lot happier. We wouldn't say that that's not mutually beneficial. Does not have to be equally better off. Okay. Did anyone go down? Occasionally I get people who go down. Did anyone fall in their satisfaction? And by the way, this is why I told you to start eating. This is important. Who got the Starburst? Okay, Emily, you got the Starburst. Now, when you traded the Starburst, did you trade the Starburst as a package, or did you open up the individual Starburst?
I was actually thinking about it, so I did trade it as a package just because it was a lot easier, and I felt like me personally, I don't really love Starburst.
Sure.
So, like, if someone only gave me one small Starburst for like whatever my kid is,
Yeah.
I would be like, whatever, maybe. But like, I felt like if I gave them a whole package, then there's more.
Of course, you can open up the package and then give them multiple Starbursts, right?
Oh, true.
Yeah. But who did you trade with?
I traded.
Who did you trade the Starburst with?
Well, like the people around me.
Yeah, but who? Name somebody.
Sorry.
It's right there on our name.
Yeah,
Maybe I should require people to put it on both sides, and then you can know each other. I like that. So Beatrice, you got the Starburst, right?
Yeah.
And you got them at the package. Have you opened the package? That's kind of important. Do you know why that's important? Because unlike M&Ms, there are good Starbursts and there are bad Starbursts. All M&Ms taste the same. But everyone knows that blank Starbursts are the best. Which Starbursts are the best?
Pink.
Red is correct. What did you say?
Pink.
Pink? Pink isn't bad. And everyone knows some of them are really bad, like
Yellow.
yellow, correct, right? I'm kidding when I say that, and you have to know I'm kidding, because if everyone agreed yellow was bad, they would not make yellow, right? Like, I never understood in Harry Potter how they have, like, the every flavor jelly bean, and it was like, I got puke. It's like, why are you making that? What are you doing? So that's why I say open it up. Did you open it?
No.
Okay. Well, we'll just pretend it's fine. Because sometimes I get people who will get who will say, oh, I got gladly. That's why I like trading the Starburst, because the Starburst, people have very strong opinions about which ones are good and which ones are bad. And then they will discover that, oh, I traded for one and I actually don't like this flavor. Right. Wait, yeah, you got Starburst too. Oh, you got a yellow one, I'm sorry. Do you want to change how much you value your item?
Yeah, I'm gonna go down.
You're going to go down. What were you before?
I was I said 7. Now you put me as a 5.
So I'm going to, ooh, that's 2.
Negative.
So that means we went from 200, so that's actually 200. Yeah. Yeah, see, it's like I have to tell you guys to open things. You guys might want to change, because you got a red one. So you don't like the red one. Do you like the red one?
Yeah, they're alright.
Do you like the yellow ones? Because he has a yellow one. Maybe we want to do that. But right now, though, I'm happy to do the adjustment. There you go. See? Look, now both parties are better off, right? Because you needed that complete information. If you don't have complete information, it is entirely possible that the total utility will fall. Because people make mistakes. People don't always know what they're doing. But whenever you see a trade and you see people make the mistake, the answer is usually not to end the trade. The answer is to fix the information problem. That's why I tell people you should probably open the individual parts before you trade, so you don't run into that. So Okay. This doesn't mean that mistakes don't happen, yada, yada, yada. Sometimes I think about, oh, what is it? Sweatshop. Sweatshop. They make clothes. Are they good or are they bad? Bad. Why do you say that they're bad? Low pay too, right? Long hours. Kind of like terrible. All right. So then the question becomes, why do people take these jobs? It's the best they have, right? You think it's terrible working conditions because you're comparing it to your alternatives. You think it's low pay because you're comparing it to your alternatives. You think it's long hours because you're comparing it to how many hours you work. But that is not the relevant metric. The relevant metrics is this terrible compared to their alternative? Is this low compared to their alternative? Is this long compared to their alternative? People go after these jobs, which tells us, well, that might not be what we want to see. We would want to see them have even better options. That doesn't mean that we should ban sweatshops, because as revealed by their preferences, this is the best option. People will leave their families, travel outside the rural areas, go to the cities to take these jobs. Because while they are bad conditions at low pay with long hours, working outside with substandard farming technology, doesn't like a plow sometimes, and in some extreme cases, working in the weather, exposed to the elements, subjecting yourself to the ups and downs of the crop markets, right? The food markets, which can be really bad as well. Outside in the sweat, that's even worse. And so before we say these things should not exist, sweatshops should not exist, keep in mind the fundamental theory of change. The fact that people are choosing it is information. Before we say we should get rid of this, we should say, why are they choosing it if it's so bad? If they're choosing it because they just don't know how bad it is, there's an information problem, they go out there, they regret it, but they can't get the money to go back home, then that's a reason to correct the information problem. That's a reason to maybe sponsor people to go back to their home village and tell people this is not something you want to do. You know, don't go out there. But it doesn't mean you should just get rid of the option altogether. That's a little weird. Just open the Starbucks and investigate. Any questions? Okay. So that's the basic, like, economists love trade. That's the basis of why we like trade, this fundamental theorem. But that's the kind of demand side. Let's talk about the supply side. I'm going to give you some numbers. I'll get rid of this one. Let's keep the fundamental theorem up there. Is this going to be... There are good markers and there are bad markers. Let me tell you, when you work in education, you develop very strong opinions about markers. I think I'm just going to do... I'm going to change the numbers a little. I'm going to change the products a little bit. We'll do maximum fish, maximum wheat. This is a little different than my notes. In my notes, I use wine and chocolate, but then people get distracted by quality. And obviously, there's different qualities of fish and wheat, so maybe I shouldn't even use those. But at least quality is less of an issue for these. And I'm going to have France and Germany and Switzerland. And then we all get to learn how we spell Switzerland. And let's say we're going to do 1 and 10. We're going to do 120 and 240. And we will do 80. I guess. Yep, we'll do that. Okay. Might want to change the fish and meat part, but that's okay. This works fine for our purpose. This is hypothetical. So in this hypothetical example, if France focuses all of its efforts on making fish, it'll make 80 tons of fish. Or if Germany focuses all of its efforts on growing wheat, it'll make 240 tons of wheat. Maybe you can put this over the course of a year, or a month, or an hour, or whatever makes sense to you. But this is the basic setup. The question becomes, who should catch fish? Which country should specialize in making fish? Germany. Why do you say Germany beats us? Right, yeah, there's temptations to do Germany, right? And you're going to say the same thing with wheat, I suppose, as well, right? Anyone disagree? Yeah?
It's good France.
What do you say, France?
Do they have a better opportunity cost?
Ah, there's the key part. You're absolutely right. So, Beatrice, you're making the mistake that everyone mistakes, so don't feel bad. That's fine. That's whatever happens all the time. We do not want to focus on the absolute advantage. Or who can produce the most. Because that only looks at the benefits. It does not look at the costs. Instead, we want to look at, does anyone know what it's called? Not competitive. Not competitive, not competitive advantage.
Comparative?
Comparative advantage. Who can produce 1 unit output at the lowest cost? In other words, we're considering not just how much comes out, how much they create, but also how much they give up. Which nation sacrifices the least for 1 unit of output? In sum, we do this equation. The opportunity cost of A divided by A. So if I'm asking who should specialize in fish, we say, what is the opportunity cost of fish? How much fish do they make? We divide. We good so far? Y'all are quiet. Good? You good? Yeah. So then, let's do some math. For France, everyone likes the math part. What's the math here? What is their opportunity cost for growing fish? Yeah.
France has access to a long coastline.
Okay, but what is their opportunity cost?
Oh,
What is the opportunity cost for doing the numerator?
20 tons of wheat.
20 tons of wheat. And what do they get?
80 tons of fish.
8 tons of fish. What's 20 divided by 80?
1/4.
1/4. So, in other words, 1 ton of fish, or 1F, costs 1/4 of a wheat. Because I put fish in the denominator, I'm essentially turning this equation into 1/4 divided by 1. 1/4 divided by 1 is the same as just 1/4. I'll make this a little proper one. What about Germany? What's the math there? 240 over 120. So in other words, every fish that Germany produces costs them 2 wheat. Again, when I said they could devote all the resources to making fish, or they can devote all the resources to making wheat. They have to make choices. Yeah, go ahead. Why is the wheat in the? Because the wheat is the opportunity cost. So this is who has the comparative advantage in producing fish? Fishes are A. This is our act value. The opportunity cost of A, the opportunity cost of fish is wheat. So 240 in the numerator. What we get is fish. That goes in the denominator 120. What is that? So it's going to be the I should make this bigger. And I mistakenly wrote opportunity cost of A divided by A. That bigger. The box around it. Sure. And finally, Switzerland. What's Switzerland? What's Switzerland's for fish?
10 over 1.
10 over 1. Which is just equal to 10. In other words, one fish costs 10 wheat. Switzerland does not have a lot of places to grow fish or raise fish. They got some lakes, I suppose. So who has the comparative advantage in fish?
Right.
France. Why?
Costs them the least amount of wheat to make.
Exactly. It's cheapest. Like one fish only costs them 1/4 of a ton of wheat, while in other countries it costs us 2. If we were to do wheat, who has the comparative advantage in wheat? Who would? What would we get?
Switzerland.
Switzerland. So why Switzerland? Because it would be 1 over 10. Because all you're doing is you're taking the reciprocal. Excellent. So this becomes 80 over 20, which is 4, right? This becomes 1/2. This becomes 1/10. Even though Switzerland is way at the bottom here, it only produces 1 ton of fish and 10 tons of wheat. It's like clearly the worst of these 3 countries. It's actually best at making wheat. It can't make very much wheat, but it sacrifices the least amount of stuff by making it. It's the one that's specialized in wheat. France is the one that's specialized in fish. And if it turns out that people need a lot more fish than France can handle, or a lot more wheat than Switzerland can make, then Germany steps in. Make sense? This is comparative advantage. This tells us a couple of cool things. Like, one, we shouldn't look simply at the benefit when figuring out what we should produce. We should also consider the opportunity cost. There's a lot of news lately about the U.S. should make more steel, right? There have been the steel tariffs that have been popping up suddenly. And the argument is, well, we have a really great workforce, a really talented workforce, and we have all this equipment, and we can make steel really well. And I'm sure we can. But there are other things that are also valuable that our labor force can do. Things that other labor forces in other countries might not be able to do, or might not be able to do as well. And even though we might have an absolute advantage in steel, or in making ships, or in growing soybeans, or whatever it is, that doesn't mean we have a comparative advantage. You can't just look at benefits, you gotta look at the costs. Any questions? Okay. Let me do another example. Well, let me do a little bit of advice. You, in the near future, have just graduated. This is you've just gotten your first real job. You're working in an office, you have a boss, you're trying to do some project, and the boss asks you, to look up info on the database. It's for some presentation. It's not super urgent. It's got to be done this week. It's not like something needs to be figured out next hour. You know, the company has this big internal database of sales. You are not familiar with this database. Every company is different. Companies complain about how we don't prepare students enough, which there's some validity to that, but there's another part of it that's not. Like, how can we possibly prepare students for what's weird about your company? Like, that seems like a waste of time. And in this case, like, we couldn't possibly prepare you for it. You do not know how to operate this database. You have two options. One, if you do it yourself, you estimate maybe it'll take you like 5 hours. You could, though, ask your boss, hey, I don't understand how to work this database. Could you teach me how to work this database? And maybe it'll take, like, your boss way less time, 30 minutes. What do you do? Do you ask for help, or do you try to figure it out yourself?
Help.
How many one ways ask for help? Okay. Most of you, right? Pretty much all of you ask for help. What do you want to ask for help, Sam?
Waste time. So
Mm-hmm.
why would I spend like figuring out myself when I can ask somebody?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That makes sense. So as an economist, I'm like, I think that's wrong. I think you're wrong. I think you're all wrong. Because you are thinking in terms of absolute advantage. You are not thinking in terms of comparative advantage. I agree. It would be a lot faster if you asked your boss for help. I agree. You would save a lot of time. So, Sam, it's your first day on the job. You've asked your boss for help. You've saved 4.5 hours. What are you doing with those 4.5 hours?
Other things, other projects.
What, like filing? But like, what are you doing, right? You used up half an hour of your boss's time. What is your boss sacrificing? If there's a presentation later this week, as I mentioned, he's probably giving up time to prepare for it, or research, or make a phone call. It's admittedly hard to tell exactly what they're giving up because you don't know exactly everything that's going on. But recognize that just because you're saving time, it doesn't mean that that's a good idea, because you are also costing someone else time. And the reason why you were hired is so that you can handle smaller stuff while other people handle bigger stuff. You're Switzerland. You're bad at this, that's true, but you're bad at everything. Right? And so even though you do not have an absolute advantage in getting this information, you do seem to have a comparative advantage. Yeah.
Doesn't it also have to take into account the fact that spending 5 hours doing something your company's paying you for 5 hours to do this work instead of paying you 30 minutes?
But again, you have to think about the whole picture. So they are paying you. You can also think about it as they're paying you to save your boss half an hour of time. Right? If you think of it that way, right? Then it's like maybe that's what they're doing. And I'm not saying the answer is never ask your boss for help. I'm saying before you do, seriously try to do stuff on your own. And if your boss is like, why did you not ask me for help? If you respond, I didn't want to bother you, I wanted to see if I could do it myself. Even if that was the wrong decision, they will appreciate your initiative and they will appreciate your thought process. On the other hand, if you make the opposite mistake, if you pester them for things that you should figure out what to do, they will get pissed off. My wife used to work at a law firm, and she was there for a while, so she advanced in the ranks. And she would get so pissed at new associates who emailed her all the time about how do I get this information? could you like look at my like thing that I'm working on, my brief I'm working on, or how should I approach this thing, or how should I do these citations, or how can I get access to this database? And she's like, it takes me so long to give them instructions. I might as well do it myself. Like, what good are you? She would get really mad. And so I tell people, this story, so you do not make that mistake. Do not confuse absolute advantage with comparative advantage. Again, doesn't mean you never ask for help, but don't like make it the first thing that comes to mind. Seriously, try to figure it out. Any questions? How am I doing in time? Oh, I'm doing pretty fine. Okay. So, if there's no questions about this, I'm going to get rid of this. Well, Switzerland has comparative advantage. Let's talk trade deficit. This really puts the macro and stuff. This is kind of a little microwave. This is kind of a little microwave. Let's do a little macro. Does anyone know what the trade deficit is? Yeah.
The difference in imports versus exports in a country.
And which is bigger?
The deficit when the imports are larger.
NX is our symbol for net exports. It equals exports minus imports. And so the trade deficit is when NX is negative. You know, the imports are bigger, so you get a negative number. How do you feel about the trade deficit?
Like in the United States?
Yeah, like is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing?
It's not that deep.
It's what?
It's not that deep.
It's not that deep?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
I feel like people have a whole conflated perception that it's weakening our country, that we're importing a lot of stuff, but it's really not that deep.
When you say not that deep, you meant it as it's not that significant rather than it's not that big.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that like some lingo I'm just not aware of? Maybe it is. Okay, you're like, yeah, it is. I once used the term "riz" in class, and students were very impressed. But I guess I won't. Yeah, okay, we'll go with that. It's not that deep. It's not that important. That's correct. Politicians get really upset about the trade deficit. Voters will get upset about the trade deficit. Economists, generally speaking, do not care. And we don't care for a couple of reasons. Why the trade deficit doesn't matter. You can put a little asterisk in there saying, well, it can tell you something about the composition of the economy. But when I say it doesn't matter, it tells you nothing about the quality of the economy. One, trade increases total utility. By the fundamental theorem of exchange, trade increases total utility. Who cares? Both parties are better off. This is not an issue. Now, people will say, but we can't afford the trade deficit. What does a deficit mean? What is that word?
A lacking, a difference in a negative sense.
So we have a budget deficit, as we will discuss when we do the government budget in the United States. What does that mean? The government's budget deficit mean?
You overspend.
What? We overspend. Right? We spend more. How do we make up that difference?
We haven't.
Taxes,
Well, I'm not talking about how you balance the budget. I'm talking about if the government is spending more money than it brings in taxes, how does it make up that difference? Right. Exactly. It is a combination of printing money and lending money out. Generally speaking, it's just borrowing a bunch of money. which is why the U.S. has a lot of debt. The total amount that we owe is huge. We'll talk about it later. But this is what drives me crazy about the trade deficit. It's not actually a deficit. We don't have to borrow money in order to fill the trade deficit. So when people say, oh, we can't afford this, they're thinking as if there's some sort of debt. We have to borrow money to make it happen. But no debt is created. This is completely sustainable. You can have a trade deficit forever. And in fact, many of you do have a trade deficit. How many of you go shopping at Giant or Safeway or Trader Joe's? Pick any one. How many of you work at the stores that you buy from? Oh, virtually none of you. None of you, actually. Therefore, you have a trade deficit with Giant, Safeway, Trader Joe's, whatever you want to pick. Because you are importing from them, but you export nothing to them. You don't sell them anything, but you buy things from them. It's completely sustainable. What does Maryland make? What do we export to other states? Just within the context of the state.
Crabs.
Everyone says crabs first, and everyone says Old Bay second. I'm sorry. This is literally every time. Literally every time I've done this in this state. Crabs, Old Bay. And then everyone's like, and then I asked, what else do we do?
Under Armour?
I was like, dead silence. Under Armour? Okay. Oh, there you go. That's something. Again, though, like the management, I think is here. I don't think the production's here. But you're right. There's management that happens, right? They do some research, I'm sure. They do some consumer stuff. They do consumer research. They do advertising plans and everything. Make new products. What else?
Guinness.
Guinness?
Yeah, there's the largest brewery in the United States is Baltimore.
Oh, really?
Or not.
Oh, okay. This is better. This is much better than what we usually get. Guinness, excellent.
Corn.
Who? What?
Corn.
Corn? I don't know if we end up exporting that, but we might end up exporting the corn. Crazy. We do machines? We make machines in Maryland? Maybe. Let me know if you figure it out.
Sports. Entertainment.
Do we export sports?
Tickets.
But like, I mean, I guess if people come to Maryland,
And teams.
or what are the teams that people would come to Maryland for?
The Ravens.
I mean, I gotta take your word for it. I don't know. Sure. I think of things like National Institute for Health, which does a lot of research that they send out to the rest of the country. I also think of Bethesda Softworks, known for making major video games that are sold not just all over the country, but all over the world. But the point is, there's lots of different individual things that we do. Some of them, notably, I did not know about. Right? I didn't know about Under Armour. I didn't know about. What did you just say?
Guinness.
Guinness. I did not know about machines. What do we import?
Not everything else, right?
We do. I know that we produce coal, but I think that we consume it all. I don't know if we export it. What else? What, potatoes, right? Cars, hamsters, any number of things, right? I don't know. We just at the pet store the other day. My youngest one wanted a hamster. But any number of things, right? And so, do we have a trade deficit with the rest of the United States? I honestly don't know. In fact, I've tried looking this up multiple times. Nobody keeps track of this. There's estimations. But it's not like when goods and services cross state borders, anyone is paying attention. Right? In fact, that's something written into the Constitution, right? You can't like stop states from trading with each other in that way. There's all this law around it and so forth. But it's not like at a port, at an international port, where when something is imported from another country, we count it. And it's all kept track of the best it can. It's like nothing like that. We don't necessarily know, but for me, that is significant. That we have trade deficits. Clearly, there's some sort of trade deficit. Maybe it's with us, maybe we have a surplus, maybe we don't. But some states certainly have trade deficits. Nobody cares. It's always seem to care when it's international. That's a sign that maybe it doesn't matter. Okay. The last one, though. Oh yeah, go ahead. Because it looks scary. Because I don't know, as we will discuss, people don't have a strong incentive to be informed. But another part of it is they don't necessarily know about the balance of payments. And this one requires more explanation. How many of you have traveled to another country? Oh, awesome. Many of you. This is what's so fun about teaching. You get lots of variety. Can anyone want to pick a country they were from? Or they went to, I should say, they traveled to? Anyone? Does anyone shout out? I don't care who. Germany? Canada? Oh, very exotic Canada. Brazil? Turkey?
Japan.
Japan. Awesome. Now, when you traveled to those countries, did you use US dollars? In the countries? No. If you went to, there's some countries where they use US dollars, like Panama does, parts of Cambodia do as well. But most of the time, if you're traveling to Brazil or Canada or Japan or China or Germany, you will use another currency. Yeah.
What about in cases where it's like people in that country kind of just accept U.S. dollars because it's worth more than their currency?
Yeah, and so there are places that are formally and informally dollarized.
Yeah.
But most of the time, you can't use U.S. dollars somewhere. In like Cambodia, for example, Angkor Wat, you can use U.S. dollars in Western Cambodia. Not so much Eastern Cambodia.
Yeah. So my brother said he went to Mexico. He said he didn't really have to exchange currency at all because everyone accepted dollars.
In certain parts of Mexico, I'm sure it's probably, where was he in Mexico?
Guadalajara.
Where is that in Mexico? Is it near the border? Because usually places near borders might do it. I know Cancun is a big tourist area. They might accept U.S. dollars. I don't know what Guadalajara is in Mexico, but I'm not saying there are not places that you can't use dollars. But usually, if you travel to another country, you need to exchange your money. So imagine you go to the exchange place. You give them U.S. dollars, and they give you Japanese yen or Brazilian real or euros or Canadian dollars. Why did they do that? But why are they giving you currency that they can use to pay their workers and rent and taxes? And collecting currency that they cannot use for any of those things? Yeah?
Used to pay international debts.
Yeah. So what we have to do is we have to say, what are the reasons for why somebody in another country wants US dollars? Another country want, and I'm going to actually expand this to want any foreign currency. Broadly speaking, there are two reasons. Yeah.
Is it because sometimes the value is important?
Sure, sometimes there's a value exchange. People are trading currencies, but then that's just a means to an end. Like, if I'm buying a currency with the aim that maybe I think it's going to be worth more in the future, and so I want to sell it to somebody, well, then you're just selling the currency, and now that person has that dollar, and they have some sort of that. Does that answer your question? Right. So it's just, you're just thinking of like, that's just a journey along the way. There has to be some ultimate reason. Why does somebody in another country want another country's currency? They buy things from them. So option one is they might import. Right? If you are in Iceland, you might say, I want US dollars because I want to buy the latest game from Bethesda Softworks. Or I am in Japan and I would like some US dollars because I want to buy some Guinness. Right? For example. Yeah.
Inflation.
So what do you mean?
Like, let's say like your currency's prone to high rates of inflation.
Sure. But then like you're using the so I like that. So let's build on that. Let's imagine you're like in say Venezuela, as we will talk about actually. And you're like, oh my goodness, the Venezuelan currency is getting lots of inflation. I want to take my Venezuelan dollars and I want to turn them into US dollars. Now, you can't just literally hold on to those dollars, but you can take an even better step. What would be an even better step to take rather than literally holding on to the currency?
Banking it.
Banking it, right? You heard it as well. Invest, right? More broadly, invest. Because if you take that money, not only is it not losing value due to inflation, it's gaining value because it's getting a return. Oops. I don't know why I said important when I meant important. Why did you let me do that? I think I was thinking of the next stage. Investment. In other words, there are two reasons why people in other countries want foreign currencies. And I say foreign currencies broadly because, again, people will say, well, maybe people in Cambodia want dollars so they can exchange it. That's true. That's kind of a rounding error. The vast majority of the reason why people want US dollars and the reason why people want any currency that's not their own is because they either want to buy stuff from the country or they want to invest in the country. Right? If you want to put money in the US banks to maybe take advantage of our higher interest rates, you need US dollars to put in US banks. Well, if a country has a trade deficit, then that means we know that this is a pretty small consideration. We are sending money abroad as we buy stuff. People have those dollars. They're somewhat interested in buying our stuff, but clearly they're not. There's dollars left over. They're doing? They're overwhelmingly investing in the United States. NX is the net flow of investment. I'm sorry, NX is the net flow of goods and services. CA is the net flow of investment. NX, as mentioned, is net exports. CA is the capital account. As net exports is the net flow of goods and services, the exports minus the imports. The capital account is the net flow of investment. Just as there are people abroad investing in the United States, there are Americans investing abroad. And so if we take all the money flowing into the economy and subtract off in the form of new investments and subtract off all the money flowing out of the economy in the form of investments abroad, you get the capital account. The United States has a trade deficit. NX is negative. But we have a positive capital account. CA is positive. The balance of payments simply states that if you take the capital account and then you add in net exports, you get zero. Or, subtracting from both sides, the capital account equals the trade deficit. In other words, another reason why the trade deficit doesn't matter is it's an arbitrary distinction between the net flow of goods and services and the net flow of investment. You're, oh my goodness, we can't possibly afford this. No, we can afford it because people are investing in the United States. They are buying U.S. debt. They are buying U.S. stocks. They are building U.S. companies. They are putting money into like lending companies money, like bonds. They are starting venture capital firms. The money is flowing back in. It's just flowing in a different form, one that is not captured by NX. Any questions? Well, if I was you, I would be like, well, that's interesting, but I don't know. Is that really true? I would like to see some data. And I'm like, well, that's fair. I would like to see some data too if I were you. Because it seems like kind of a funny coincidence that it all happens to work out that way. But in reality, this is an accounting identity. It is entirely true. And so what I did is I pulled some data up. This is a little old, but I pulled some data up anyway. Right, you see, it stops in 2020. And here's our balance of payments. I put it as a percent of GDP to make it a little easier to see. Because if I do it with the raw numbers, it's like very hard to see in the beginning. The yellow line is the capital account. The blue line is the current account, also known as the NX. Right, because think about it as stuff that currently exists, goods and services. Capital account is investment, because you're making capital. And so if you take the current account, the NX part, and then you add in the capital account, note that they are mirror images of one another, and when you add them together, 0. The green line, balance of payments. Not always literally 100% at 0, because there's fluctuations. Sometimes something is exported in one year, like December, and then imported the following year. You know, there's going to be some random fluctuations there. You know, the investment happens in January or something like that. But it is remarkably consistent. This is a real thing. Freaking out about the blue part. Nobody appreciates the yellow part. Actually, if they do appreciate the yellow part, it's, oh my goodness, foreigners are buying our debt. Oh, you're owned by them. It's an investment. It's mutually beneficial. Right? Any questions? Okay, well, that's the time we have for today. So make sure to clean up your candy and wrappers and so forth, and make sure that you safely get home. I will hopefully see you on Thursday. Bye, everybody.